Members of Parliament, support staff, those following via social media, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon and welcome to this Central Committee meeting of Parliament for today, Wednesday, May 7th. This is Central Committee meeting number 19. At this time, I want to welcome the Honorable Minister of Justice, Ms. Natalie Tacklin, and her support staff. We have established a quorum of 10 members. Please stand for a moment of silence. Thank you. I don't have any notifications from before this meeting. Are there any notifications at this time from the meeting? This does not appear to be necessary at this time, so we can go over to the agenda point for this meeting, and that is discussion with the Minister of Justice on the status of the national decrees and payments for the justice workers. This request is registered on the IS 737, dated March 17th of this year, as well as IS 780, dated March 26th of this year. The meeting was requested by the members of Parliament Ottley, Lacroes, and Lewis. Just a brief recap of the request for this meeting. As I mentioned, it was on the 17th of March that a request was received from the members Ottley and Lacroes with the request that a Central Committee meeting of Parliament be convened with the Minister of Justice to discuss the national decrees and payments for justice workers. Considering that in accordance with the rules of order and the request for a Central Committee meeting, the aforementioned letter was missing a third signature, a subsequent letter signed by MP Ottley, MP Lacroes, and MP Lewis was received by Parliament on March 26. Hence, the reason for the two letters. And as I mentioned, they're registered on the numbers 737 and 780, respectively. At this time, I would like to give the floor to the requesters of this meeting to elucidate their request if necessary. Can I give the floor to any of the requesters at this time? I think I see MP Ottley. And MP Ottley, you would want to make an introduction to the topic. MP Ottley, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good day to the Honorable Minister of Justice and her support staff. Madam Chair, I thought that this meeting is very important. I've had a couple of conversations with the Honorable Minister of Justice on the situation pertaining to the L.B.A.s for the justice workers. We have seen a bit of unrest in the public, and in my opinion, I explained to the minister that I didn't think that the minister was revealing enough information to the public on the situation pertaining to the L.B.A.s. It is a sensitive matter. It is something that the justice workers has been going through for many years. And of course, when you're talking about payment that is due, persons are eager. So I think that this was important, and we can use this opportunity to bring whatever clarity is needed. And once the minister presents, if there's any other questions, then I'll continue from there, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, MP Ottley, for introducing the request that was made by the three MPs to the Minister of Justice. And I will now turn the floor over to the Minister of Justice to give her presentation or her statement on the topic as requested by the members of Parliament. Minister Tacklin, you have the floor.
Yep. Oh, okay, good. I thought I had to turn green. My bad. Good afternoon, honorable members of Parliament, honorable Chair Lady, and indeed I do thank the requesters for this opportunity to be able to shed some more light, because sometimes not all information can be gathered through press briefings or press releases or even just conversations with the unions. So I welcome this to give a bit of an update on what we
Minister,
found.
if you give me one moment, please. Sorry to interrupt you. However, we need to, I think, adjourn for just a few minutes, about 5 minutes, in order to get a presentation in
Up on
place. Yes. So meeting adjourned for 5 minutes. Members of Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back after that brief adjournment to make sure that the presentation, which will be made by Minister Tacklin, is also available on the screen for all to see, including our members of Parliament here. So welcome back, and I immediately continue and again offer the floor to Minister Tacklin. Minister Tacklin, you have the floor.
Thank you, Chair Lady, and I believe the presentation is up now. Again, it's just a short update and to explain where we are and what the holdup has been. So again, where I left off was thanking the requesters for this meeting and giving me this opportunity to also update Parliament and the public at home and the justice workers themselves on the status of this process. I want to start off by acknowledging what we all know. This process has taken longer than expected, and I fully understand the growing frustration. That frustration is not merely felt in this hall, but first and foremost among the dedicated workers of the justice chain. This is also why I have consistently and constantly communicated through the press and the unions to give updates where I can. Nevertheless, some background. When I assumed office, one of the first challenges I encountered was the lack of clarity and consistency around how the placement process was being handled. There was no uniformity, no single point of reference, and from what I had seen, processes were changed across batches. To complicate matters further, one of the key civil servants who had served as the driving force, the engine, behind producing the batches under both of my predecessors, departed the ministry shortly after I took office. That loss of institutional memory and operational knowledge, combined with already limited organizational capacity, made it even more clear. What I inherited was not a system that could simply be continued. It required structural review and realignment. With all the good intentions we've had as the ministry, this has also been a learning experience. It is the first time in our country's history that a project of such scope and complexity is being undertaken. And as with any first, this has not been without its growing pains. These challenges have made one thing absolutely clear. The validation process is not just important, it is critical. It is the safeguard that ensures the integrity of the entire exercise. We cannot afford to rush ahead only to create more confusion, errors, and dissatisfaction. This became especially evident with batch 12, which was the first batch that I had received merely to countersign, let me add, and to distribute back in December. My predecessor, who is sitting here in the hall today, was the one responsible for creating the batches along with the ministry prior to that. Of the 25 individuals that I handed a national decree to that day, 20 of them expressed dissatisfaction to me, pointing to inconsistencies or mistakes in their placement or their compensation. That moment warranted pause by my person. It was a clear sign that despite our best efforts, something was not working as it should. That is why we are now in the final stages of engaging with SOAB to independently carry out a validation process. This is necessary not only to correct what has gone wrong, but to build a transparent and reliable foundation for all the remaining placements. It is the only responsible path forward. At the same time, we're also looking closely at revamping the objection procedure. We've seen firsthand that the current process does not sufficiently support the concerns of personnel in a clear or inclusive way. Moving forward, our aim is to introduce a more transparent and accessible objection process, one that empowers civil servants to raise concerns, receive timely responses, and feel confident that their voices are heard and taken seriously. I will elaborate further on that later in the presentation. I want to assure Parliament and the justice workers themselves that I remain fully committed to finalizing this matter, not just to move the process along, but to ensure that when we do it right. We owe our justice workers nothing less than that. With that, I wanted to now move over to the presentation itself, where I'll take a brief walk through the current status, along with the next steps that we intend to take in more detail. So this is an overview here of the entire placement process overview as of today, as of May 2025. There were a total active number of justice workers on January 1st, 2023, were 530, I should say, since January 1st, 2023, because even if you entered into service during 2023, you are still included in this process. Of this 530, I should also add that not all of these individuals will receive a Landsbesluit. We have some people that are, as we call, arbeidscontractanten, that have the Dutch nationality, or that do not have the Dutch nationality and are therefore not eligible to receive a LB, but that does not mean that they will not be corrected and receive a proper placement and a proper salary correction. So this is why sometimes when you add up all the numbers, it maybe won't come up to this amount. So I ask that you keep that in mind. So far of this amount, as of May 2025, 289 LBs have been issued. Batch 13 was sent up to the governor and included 23 LBs. 2 of those were removed and will need corrections. Those individuals actually asked themselves that their LB be removed because there were still some issues in their files that they wanted to see corrected. So 23 are currently at the governor awaiting signature. Then we have those that are pending are 189, and I'll go over to an overview here of the breakdown throughout the ministry. So the yellow lines are those from batch 23 that are currently pending with the governor, and then, of course, we will see then the gray are those that still need to take place. Then the retroactive payments. Of course, only batches 1 to 12 have been paid out completely, as batch 13 is still pending. So to date, that amount in retroactive pay is roughly 6.4 million guilders, brutto, which has been paid to a total of 278 justice workers. 6 are pending payment, and 5 individuals had no financial change in their placement. Then the current status of the following batches. As I mentioned, 13 is a mixture of various departments, and those are with the governor for final signature. And in order to make up for the delay that we've experienced so far in being able to really churn out these batches, our intention is to combine batches 14 and 15 into one. This will be every department, all remaining workers except for the prison, because as you'll notice in the slide before, nobody in the prison has received a placement up to today. And I do find it important that what we've noticed throughout the process as well, and it's an issue that I'm dealt with all the time when people are like, Minister, it's not fair. For example, I'll take the example of police officers. You have 2 officers sitting in the same vehicle together, doing the same type of work, yet one of them has received the LB and the proper salary and the other one isn't. And that also causes disunity within the organization, and it gives a crooked composition, and it causes problems on the work floor is what we've experienced. So what we want to do is, again, combine batches 14 and 15 to then handle all of those that are remaining, so all other departments except the prison. And then our intention is to do the prison in one batch. So batch 16 will comprise the entire staff of the Point Blanche prison. Then to the objection procedure. As I mentioned, what we were noticing now, the way that we were currently handling objections is that a person at one point received a placement from the ministry. God knows how much later, you then get your Landsbesluit, but there was no real communication in between. People were able to ask for corrections to their placement. Not everybody always received a response. Sometimes people receive the response saying, yes, we will take it into consideration, but then they get a Landsbesluit that still has the first placement on it and not the correction. And at that point, we've already issued a Landsbesluit. It's gone through the entire advisory process. It's gone to the governor. And then at that point, we're asking people to again object, and then you have to start the train all over again. So what we've said is, let's do this a little bit differently. Let's make it inclusive. Let's explain to the justice workers what is going on, why their LB is the way it is, and any additional information. What we've seen, and this is why, too, the validation is so important, and that'll be on the next slide, but sometimes the files aren't complete. And then the ministry, throughout the way, gets more information because they look into different systems. And then they're like, oh, wait, I need to fix this person's Landsbesluit, but that's never communicated to the justice worker. So the first time they learn of this is when they get something in front of them that isn't what they had actually received previously. And that explains the issues that I had in batch 12 when you have somebody, when I'm like, hey, you happy, right? You got it? And then it's, oh, but that's not what was on my placement, or I sent a correction and now it's not there. And you get people, we get unrest, and we're further in the process, and an individual still feels like they haven't gotten their rights, like they haven't been acknowledged by the government. So we said, let's look at this again. And in doing so, what we found was the objection committee was established on the basis of the Social Statute, which was something that was used after 10-10-10 for the placement of government workers. However, strangely enough, the work procedures of the objection committee were not in line with the Social Statute. So on the basis of the Social Statute, it says you get a placement, you get an offer, you get an intention from the minister to make a certain decision. So in this case, it's a draft besluit. And from there, you can object to that draft within 30 days. So what we've said now is we will now break down the objection procedure as follows. From batch 14 and on, batch 13, because those batches we wanted to get out, those individuals will still be able to object to the objection committee. However, from batches 14 and on, the process will be that you will now receive a draft LB from the minister, from the ministry, along with your entire file and any additional information that the government received. And you will then be told, look, based on our verification, our validation, this is what your placement should be. Do you have any additional information? Do you have an objection or any corrections that you would like to see made? If the person has an objection, they have 30 days to object to the draft to the objection committee. The objection committee will function independently from the minister. There are also 2 representatives of the union in the objection committee. I'll say here too that we had 2 members of the objection committee that was installed last year resigned. So we've since now, I actually just today signed a contract and an agreement with somebody to take over as chair of that committee, and then we'll draft a new LB for them as well. But basically then the objection committee would issue an advice to the minister, which in principle is binding, unless of course, you know, in everything it's a binding tenzij, zwaarwegende gronden. That's the way it's written in the Social Statute also. But if there's no objection, then your file is complete. Then you go into phase 3. The advice process starts, and then it goes up to the governor. It's countersigned by the minister, etc. And we feel that including the justice worker earlier into this procedure will really help the process. Because again, otherwise, if you had a year of silence and then you get something that's not what you thought it was supposed to be. So then I wanted to talk a little bit about why the validation is so important. And I think one of the main issues identified ahead of the validation phase is a discrepancy between the bruto and the netto salary of some, which in several cases led to unintended salary loss. And that requires careful recalibration to ensure that no employee experiences a reduction in their take-home pay as a result of the placement. Because what we were seeing in some instances that you put a person in a certain scale, but when you make a net calculation, they actually have less money than they were getting before. So then it's, hey, wait a minute, I can't put them in this trade, I gotta maybe adjust the trade. So that was one of the things that we were noticing before this validation was put into place. Then another key issue is that there's incomplete or inconsistent personnel file history, particularly regarding events prior to and beyond 10-10-10. And these gaps have had a direct impact on placement decisions, requiring adjustments to accurately reflect each employee's service history and their entitlements. Another contributing challenge has been the inherited overformation in certain departments expressed in full-time FTEs, combined with the presence of functions that no longer exist in the function book. This has resulted in more complex and nuanced placement decisions, particularly in determining how and where individuals should be placed within the existing framework. We have quite a few examples of individuals and functions that somehow or the other disappeared out of the function book, and then that person is working there doing a particular job since Jesus was a child, and then the function is gone. So then we need to look at then what you do with this. So this also makes the situation all the more complex. And as a result of that, some employees have been assigned to comparable, or as we say, passende functies. And these are positions that match the scope and level of their work, but may carry a different title or classification than what they previously held. And this has understandably led to questions and concerns from the personnel. So it's become clear that additional attention must be given to the communication and to the explanation of these placements to ensure that the employees not only understand the rationale behind their assigned function, but also feel respected and informed throughout the process. This is something the ministry is taking seriously and working hard to address moving forward. Overall, the reality is that we had 14 years of changes in personnel history, including transitions in and out of government, varying salary scales, and moving from department to department, which has caused for a lot of complexity and accurate placement. And this is why we also deem this validation process all the more important. And again, it's why I noted that we're right now in the final stages of signing an engagement with O.E.C so that they can conduct the validation on behalf of the ministry, because I'll be honest here on the floor of Parliament that we are also stressed and thin within the ministry when it comes to financial controllers and individuals who are equipped to carry out this type of work. And it's why we have had to look for an option to outsource. This is also a hypothetical situation, and not really hypothetical, it's actually one that we've come across, but a scenario in which you see that, the validation is important. So let's say under the old system, a worker was actually performing duties that were equivalent to a senior legal advisor or a senior policy advisor, but their title in the payroll system was simply listed as administrative staff. And then when you get the new function book, then there's this discrepancy with the proposed placement that comes with a lower salary scale and doesn't reflect the actual responsibilities that that person carried out. So, for example, the role didn't exist by name in the old records, but was clearly defined in the new function book. The salary was misaligned with the actual duties due to outdated or vague job titles. Sometimes we saw entire departments have disappeared. And, it's a complex procedure. And what we're seeing here, however, is that this, once this validation phase really helps us to gather all that information, because the added complexity as well within justice is that in the past years, we've also used 4 different payroll systems. And then you have documents that are in one system in Join, you have some that are in DACOS. So there's parts of this individual's personnel history is scattered over various places, and there's sometimes that you can't even find the documents then. It's when you talk to the person that they come and say, oh, but I have this email, and I have this letter that I received. And it's why we really want to get that full picture, because I feel like if people have waited this long, that we owe them the respect to take them seriously and to listen to them and to really make sure that they get the proper things handed to them. Then again here, what we see as some of the benefits of this new approach is that we hope to then reduce delays and objections later in the process, because again, I don't like to sell people hot air and pipe dreams, and it's one thing you give them a LB, but then they're still unhappy, and then they still have to go into an objection, they don't hear anything back, and God knows how long then they have to wait until they get that proper placement. So we're really hoping to have those conversations and those discussions earlier in the process so that there's more understanding later and you're not going to get the objections after. I should also add that in the new objection procedure that we would be using from batch 14 and on, the initial objection then is to the objection committee. If you are still unhappy with your LB after it has been issued by the governor, then you would have to go to the ambtenaren rechter, to the civil service judge. Then again, we also feel this new process ensures more transparency by sharing the proposed placement with the individual or the proposed LB prior to it being issued. And it gives the justice workers a real voice in the process. We also feel that it ensures a fair outcome by incorporating this advice from the objection committee. And hopefully, that we can deliver error-free LBs, because I think the reality of it is that, again, despite our best intentions, that there have been many errors in the process, and we're learning from it, and we're trying to move ahead in ways that every time with every batch, I think you learn something new and how we can do this better and do it different. So that is it for my presentation right now, and then I'll take any questions that the esteemed members may have.
Thank you, Minister Tacklin, for your presentation on the topic of justice workers and their placements and payments. At this time, we go over now to having members of Parliament react or ask questions for the questions on the matter. And the first MP I'm going to give the floor to is MP De Wever. MP De Wever, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Good afternoon, everybody. once again, and good afternoon to the minister and her team. The minister did go very fast through a report, and it was very hard to keep up to even take notes with it. So I would actually like to see if it would be possible, or through the chair lady with the feed, if we already received the report, because I tried to keep up with it. And in terms of initial reactions, I will say that the most revealing aspect of this process around the function books is that it seems very far away, again, from where it initially started, in the sense of the greatest amount of corrections or let's say progress in it that started under 2 ministers ago. I'm a little bit concerned in terms of the process, where it is now or what has to be done versus where it started. And the reason I say that is because initially, when we were getting updates from this, we learned that, okay, yes, it's going to go through in batches, and there's a process that was explained to us beforehand, but it seemed to be working, right? Because we were churning out the LBAs faster. And then where we see an improvement in the system, because I tried to take some screenshots while the presentation was happening. When you see a new, transparent, and efficient approach, what would be really nice for us to be able to compare is where the improvement suggestions or the new way of working, how that will compare versus the old one. Because when I read some of the things in terms of the phases of compilation, validation, phase 2 of the draft LBAs, where the employees have a chance to review it and then object within 30 days and then go into finalization of signing by the governor, I thought it was very similar to the existing process. So it's just to really pinpoint where the delays are, because in a nutshell, I just feel like I'm being told that it didn't work, and so now we're going to fix it. But I don't feel like that is the case, because it was already, stuff was already happening before. So I'm just a little bit confused because we went through it so quickly. Anywho, I do take note of the fact that the minister also mentioned that some difficulties rose because there's 4 payroll systems, and I want to find out what the plans are by the ministry to consolidate maybe or simplify or centralize payroll systems. I also take note of the fact, so I'm going through the questions of why I think maybe a lot of things are coming up, issues are coming up, but I'm still confused as to the process. So I take note of the fact that it was mentioned 2 members resigned, and I'm just wondering whether really the reason that we're seeing a delay or lag in the LBAs is because of people resigning or no longer being there that was really pushing the project forward, if that was even the case, that they were pushing the project forward. So I also heard the minister talk about probably outsourcing it to expedite it. But again, it goes back to my initial comments and confusion of it was working before. We were getting stuff done before. So the stall, it's not about blaming a minister or blaming an individual. It's just the stall happened. So I don't understand the stall. I really, really honestly don't understand the stall. The only one that I remembered is exactly as the minister presented, which was the reason why the prison is so complicated and nothing could happen there. And then I was a little bit surprised to see the numbers that were still open from everybody else. That's it for now. But it would help to see if we can get that report as soon as possible, because once I get the report, then I would have a lot more questions. And I hope that that was clear enough. Thanks, Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP De Weaver. I continue, and I give the floor to MP Lewis. MP Lewis, you have the floor.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to the Minister, the Honorable Minister of Justice and her support staff. Good afternoon to the honorable members of Parliament and to the listening and viewing public, especially the justice workers of this beautiful country. Minister of Justice, through you, Madam Chair, I don't know if you were ever a civil servant before, but next month I'll be serving this country by lance slide for 18 years. The first time I came into service, my initial lance slide, including my classmates, were wrong. Nearly every other Landsbesluit after that also had discrepancies, where it is no secret that I personally took government to court, moreover on my own personal matter, and that of over 100 Ambtenarenzaken. It is everyone's God-given right to do bezwaar. As Minister of Justice, your job is to make sure that the execution part of these LBs goes out. Minister, as you mentioned, I am your predecessor and my predecessor before me, even though I had issues on the way she executed certain things. It's a continued process. This month, Minister, you will have the same amount of time that I had in office. And the minister before me delivered 6 batches. I also sent to the governor about 6 batches, plus batch 13, that you're telling me in nearly 6 months after my departure that I actually started when I was Minister of Justice under my tenure. First and foremost, yes, I understand when a key component of the process left the organization, but there was also other key components. There was a law firm that was busy undertaking every single procedure that I understood that you, Minister, got rid of. That also has a major impact on the organization. So, Minister, I would like you to explain to the people of this country why was one of the major law firms that was busy with the process of validation as well and creating these LBs was also removed. As I understand, there has been some personal tension there, but I will say this, the people's business is also personal to me. So it is important that the continued service also go forward. I will continue by my questioning, through you, Madam Chair. Minister, before I left office, a bezwaar committee was formed by my person to address the discrepancies that were made. Is this committee still in place? And if not, what alternative does this minister have in place? Through you, Madam Chair, what plan does the minister have to expedite the processing of the batch moving forward? And what timeline does the minister have in place for completion of that batch? Have remaining justice workers received written confirmation regarding their placement, scale, and legal status? If not, why? Minister, I would like to also elaborate on the fact where you was talking about certain functions no longer exist within the organization. But there are current situations that I'm being faced with where employees have received Landsbesluiten with a total different function name on their Landsbesluit. The validation process is to see where the person was, where they actually work, and a definitive decision has to be made based on where they're going to be appointed. And some organizations, there are different frictions and personal matters, but your Landsbesluit is very sacred and is a powerful one. So the only way one can change or transfer into another position if they agree to it. In the sense, I'm gonna tell you one person that I understand, I wouldn't call a name, but how can their Landsbesluit have communication on it and tomorrow they end up with they're going to get a Landsbesluit for medewerker in another function? Again, moving forward, that position in the new organization, the salary scale has changed. Meaning it's higher than their actual scale in the old organization. And people are not supposed to go backward. I will further explain. For example, when I was a juvenile and vice detective, in the old system it was scale 6. In the new system that we currently have, it's scale 8. However, when I went there, they decided to place me still in a scale 6. I contested that Landsbesluit in court, and it was honored that I be given the scale 8, and at that time, the function book was in concept. Why? Because we have something called presidentscheppen, and we have something called jurisprudence. Meaning what happened for someone else before in the same like situation under dezelfde bestuursorgaan, which is the Ministry of Justice, you cannot differ from. So whether there was a LB for the new function book or not, precedence was already set within the organization from the time we had community police officers that were not placed in our old functions at the time, but then Minister Duncan saw it necessary that we enforce this, and that was used in court. And today, every single person that attested their Landsbesluiten based on that concept received a correct Landsbesluit based on what they applied for. I'm going to say this, Minister. I have given you ultimate chances and times. Many people approach me and say, when would you deal with this, Minister, on these topics? I said I would give her 6 more weeks, as you will have 6 months and 3 weeks, the same amount of time that I've sat in that position. Because I don't want to hear any more excuses as to why the people can't get what they are due to get, Minister. It is very important that you see and deal with this matter. Whatever personal issues that may be going on within the organization that you may have, or your staff apparently may have with other individuals that is delaying this process. You are that decision maker. Minister, to you, Madam Chair, have budgetary allocations been made to ensure full payments? In saying so, I did not hear, and maybe I missed it as I stepped out briefly. This retroactive payments are supposed to go back from the 10th of October 2010 for the individuals that started within the Netherlands Antilles before 10-10-10, and those upon their appointments thereafter. What is the status on the function? What is the status on the retroactive part, which we had discussions on phase 2? When it comes to issuing the full payment, back payment from the initial start of each individual within this country. How does this ministry plan to prevent such payment delay in the future? Again, I will say, as each minister has their own vision for this country, we always have to be reminded that the people is its first priority. And I will reiterate again that everyone has their rights based on Article 35 van de regeling ambtenaren rechtspraak binnen 30 dagen na het ontvangen van zijn landsbesluit om een bezwaar in te dienen. Dat is hun recht. That is their right, Minister. So delaying the process for you to ensure that their landsbesluit is correct, it is not your duty. Your duty is to ensure that it's issued. And today, when those people see their stuff, if there's any discrepancies, as I've also seen landsbesluiten with date of birth mistakes, they are human error, and the person have their rights to appeal. With that said, Madam Chair, I thank you.
Thank you, MP Lewis. I continue and I give the floor to MP De Wever. But before I give it to MP De Wever, I'll give it to MP York. MP York, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Once again, good afternoon to yourself, the griffier, the Minister and our support staff, and viewing public. Minister, to coin a phrase from a respected politician, in order to know where we're going, we got to know where we're coming from. And about 5 years ago, a promise was made by the then Minister, Anna Elaine Richardson, to handle the national decrees and bring the LBs to fruition. That promise, as of March 4th, 2024, was kept. Now, in saying that, prior to leaving office, the former Justice Minister, Minister Richardson, completed 6 batches. Correct me if I'm wrong, Minister. To you, Madam Chair, completed 6 batches. Her predecessor then did batch 7 through 12, if I'm 13, but I know it started at 7. To my knowledge, nothing was wrong with the batches 1 through 6 correct me again if I'm wrong, through you, Madam Chair, Minister. So when I sat and I watched the structures that the new procedure, and I'm the last one to complain about procedures because I'm all about structure, so I was delighted to see that a structure was brought into fruition. But also, before that, I took note of the numbers being 289 LBAs as of May 2005, if I get the date correct. And I couldn't, but maybe I got it mistaken. 20 of the 25 from batch 12 had mistakes, correct? A head nod would be fine. 20 of the 25 from batch 12 had mistakes, right? Okay, averagely. Objections, okay. Another word, objections, okay. 20 of the 25 from that singular batch had objections. So leads me to my following questions. Is it that a whole process was created because of objections from 1 out of 12 batches? And referring the minister and also the one of the speakers referred to procedures, past procedures. I would like to know if the procedures from batch 7 through 12 were the same procedures from batch 1 through 6. And if not, I would like to know what the difference in procedures were, why were the procedures changed, and if the procedures were changed, is the new procedure a correction of the procedure from 7 to 12, or the lack thereof missing from 1? Because if that was the case, why were there no issues with 1 through 6? So I'm trying to understand where this went wrong. So if the minister can clarify that. I also was made to understand that the wonder, or I would say the super employee that the minister referenced, that took part, had a major deal, that basically took part in batch 1 through 6 was not part of batch 7 through 12. And understanding what the minister explained, that employee left upon the current minister entering office. So my question is then, if the employee or the super employee that the minister referenced was part of the procedure from 1 through 6, why was that employee excluded from 7 through 12? So if the minister can clarify that for me as well. One of the speakers referenced the appeals committee. I would also like to know what the status of that is. Are all positions in that committee filled? And is the committee active or non-functional or non-active? Also, the minister touched on it lightly, but I didn't really get an explanation to why that was the case. The prison hasn't had any LBAs dealt with to date, and I would like to know what is the holdup when it comes to specifically the prison. Is that purposely held for last or purposely left undone until now? And if that is the case, are there prison workers in the upcoming batches? Are they part of the upcoming batches? And lastly, one before last, it might sound like a dumb question, but there's a reason why I'm asking it. Are all justice workers with a Dutch nationality receiving LBAs, or to be received? So once a justice worker has a Dutch nationality, is it 100% guaranteed that that justice worker will receive a LBA regardless of function in the justice ministry? And the last one, I just had it. Oh yeah, and the last one being, if I understood the new procedure correctly, well, before I go into that, there's a new procedure done by the current minister, and if I understand the head nods, there are two procedures prior, a procedure from batch 1 through 6 and a procedure from batch 7 through 12. And if the procedure from batch 1 through 6 didn't carry any objections, why was there a whole new procedure made and the minister did not revert back to the procedure from 1 through 6? And if there's a reason for that, I would like to hear that reason. And also in the new procedure, I didn't fully follow it because it was going quite fast. Maybe I didn't fully understand it, but there were, I heard of binding advices, etc. So I would like to know, besides signing the LBA in the end, what is the role of the minister in the new procedure? Because from how I understood it, basically the minister has nothing to do with the process and has nothing to say about the process unless there's super extreme circumstances. Can the minister explain what these circumstances are or could be? And is that indeed the case where basically the new procedure excludes the minister from practically any decision making? And if the new procedure involves different committees and different desks having to have to make an advice or whatever, is the minister not wary that this can lead, although I do understand structure, but that this can lead to more yellow tape instead of actually expediting the process? Because there are two sides of a coin when it comes to procedures. It can also lead to yellow tape or expedition of processes. So I would like to know if the minister has any contingency plans for that in the event of, and if that was something that was thought about. And that would be it for now for my questions. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP York. I now give the floor to MP De Wever.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. Well, the previous speaker, summed it up very well. He was a little bit more eloquent than I was in trying to ask the questions. But I think it's going to help out if I add on this sort of anecdote with it. So the expectation that has been built up ever since an improvement or action started taking place by the previous minister, Anna Richardson. What happened was there was, it was happening in a frequent manner, in a frequent enough manner that expectations of the justice workers were being managed where they had the expectation that their LBAs would be updated. Now, I will go so even further to say that, let's say if I run into police officers on different occasions, the first thing they would always say is, I still didn't get my LBA. I still didn't get my LBA. And this is where it goes back again to managing expectations of the justice workers, which I'm very sure that the minister understands. But because of this disconnect with the expectations of justice workers and where we are in this process, this is why I'm left confused, because I just need to understand what stalled the process then overall. And then I will add on to it because I wanted to listen to an additional MP, I wanted to listen to a couple of MPs before me, but no one had actually clicked yet to speak because I wanted to see if anyone was going to bring up the budget impact of this, and it was briefly brought up. And of course, then the other side of the story is, again, in managing expectations of justice workers is, it's not being processed because there's no budget. And you want to now control that story because of the expectation that was already given by things happening that they saw every time the batches were being turned out. And this is where I would like clarity or a very concise but clear answer and complete answer about no. But it is not because we don't have budget for it. It is not because we're avoiding and delaying it because of those reasons. Here's the reasons why. And again, it would be nice to have a comparison, and it's not to compare and contrast ministers and their task, but it's about really managing the expectations. And then the expectations right now of justice workers aren't being met. And then when you do that, you're going to have stories being created about well, we're delaying the process because there's no money to pay us out. And we don't want that because we know the worst case scenario, what could actually happen. And we definitely don't want a repeat of about 3 to 4 years ago where you have workers in front of the government building doing a manifestation. So thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP De Weaver. I now give the floor to MP Ottley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the Honorable Minister of Justice, I have a couple of questions. The new procedure that is taking place, was it discussed with the unions so that they understand the weight and the quote-unquote stall? The payment that is planned obviously was planned for installments. And I was going to ask the question, how does the lateness of the budget also now impact this process? Because there's twofold. One, obtaining your LBA, which is nice and dandy, but two, the main objective is to obtain funds. I also would like to touch on the prison guards. How soon can we get this process started through you, Madam Chair, for the prison guards? I have discussed with certain prison guards that have been there 10 years plus and still not properly placed in any functions and does not have an LBA. This is a sad reality. Also through you, Madam Chair, once these LBAs are situated, distributed, it means that persons are, one, in new skills, and two, receiving higher salaries. What will be the cost impact yearly that the Justice Ministry will face? And does the Minister, through you, Madam Chair, think that the Justice Ministry can maintain this increase that will come once all these LBAs are out? How many persons within the Justice Ministry are in a position currently that they are not officially placed in on paper? What is the Minister's plans moving forward to ensure that this blunder does not continue or transpire again? Honorable Minister, one advice I give to every new minister, new politician: you cannot and will not ever please everyone. I was under the impression that the LBAs had errors. Today I understand that there's objections. Be very careful, Minister, trying to be perfect. It will never be, because I guarantee you, after your process, through you, Madam Chair, you will still have objections. The idea is to ensure, one, that the procedures are followed, it's done correctly, but two, to also get it done. Do not focus merely on the fact that objections were made, because I guarantee you, you're going to put all this work in and there is going to be objections. You cannot and will not ever please 100% of your target audience. So take my advice, speed the process up, do what you have to do, which I am pretty much sure that you are doing it, but they are getting frustrated. Avoid at all costs a protest and a show in front of the government building. The justice workers are becoming impatient and would like to, one, get their LBAs, but other than that, the next battle you will face, Minister, through you, Madam Chair, is how we are going to pay them, which leads to my next question. Is it still intended to do installments or a one-time payment? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Ottley. The next MP up to speak is MP Lewis.
Yes, Madam Chair, through you, Minister. I forgot to also mention, at this particular moment, you have civil servants within your ministry that takes government to court as well, which has to do also with their placement, their correct placements. some of them which I know of a class during my tenure. The case was initiated. I spoke then to the chief of police pertaining to that particular class, and I said these people should be given the salaries and the scales that they're due to. Now, as minister, you are busy with a lot of things, and you are the minister that has the biggest ministry. And most of your departments are also external, so you won't have everything to the top of your head, which I do understand. But this particular class of police officers were brought into service 25 years ago, since the 1st of February 2000. This class has always fought government, moreover, for their salary scales, and have always won. They took government to court under my tenure. I do not know if it started before, but I know it was under my tenure, which I only learned about it after that. This case was not pulled back. When a minister gave an instruction, be it on paper, be it verbally, sometimes department heads play with it. And I did say that these people should be promoted within the scales that they're fighting for, because they're due to it. And I was told that I am creating, then I'll be creating a dumb police force. But who creates that organization when you use and abuse people in certain positions and then think that they would not get smart and say, hey, listen, instead of 150 guilders, I am due to 2 guilders. And I want my 2 guilders now. These individuals are also entitled to an arms jubileum, as it's now in April. What is the process also that one will get their arms jubileum as well? It's because it's also given via landsbesluit as well. When would these people that have their 25, their 30, their 35 years receive their arms jubileum landsbesluit as well? When are we as a ministry going to be able to turn around quickly to serve the people that are serving, and not only serving, but protecting this country? We continuously allow demotivation, and I'm telling you, you have to put your department heads in place. You have to put your foot down, minister. They are, yes, your advisors, but I keep repeating it that you have a social ministry as well, where you should allow an open door that you can also have time, a particular day, and open it up to the people within your ministry to have a talk with you, and not a town hall meeting, because people will not come to you and give you their personal business in a town hall meeting. Allow your people to speak to you with your team. If not with you, you have your designated team. I see you have Miss Leonard there. I know she's a very nice person. I've worked with her as well in the Ministry of VSR. I know Mr. Cecil Nicholas, as he was also part of a political party that I was part of. You have people that deals with people. You have people that deal with people, and it's important that you touch base with, like, I don't want to say subjects, but the individuals that work under you. When are the people going to get their landsbesluiten for their arms jubileum? That class has senior police officers as well. There also probably are many others who took government to court pending their correct landsbesluiten. It's called fictive refusal, fictive weigering, where the minister received letters from the lawyers, from the court make a decision and give the minister a particular time to answer. And minister, I understood that you have not answered to that court case as yet. And I mean, the judicial body is the highest body in this country, where you have the executive branch versus the individual. The judge make a decision. I think judgments are supposed to also be respected. When someone take their money, pay a lawyer to go to court, win, and the minister is not doing anything about it. So, Minister, when are those judgments by these individuals are going to be answered, and when is a new decision going to come based on our landsbesluit? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Lewis. I continue and I give the floor to MP Roseburg. MP Roseburg, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Blessed afternoon to my colleagues and to the Minister of Justice and her support staff. Also a blessed day to the people of St. Martin tuned in online. Minister, thank you for your presentation. Also, the honesty and clarity given in your presentation. I do have a few pointers that I would like to bring forward and clarity that I would like to receive. To start with the prison, I have heard several of my colleagues speaking about the prison, and I look back at other presentations in regards to Landsbesluiten and the prison, and I can recall that back then it was mentioned that the prison, why the prison wasn't included, and I can remember also my dear colleague MP Ottley even making an article about it to include the prison in the function book. So I would like to know what was the reason that the prison was not included, if it had to do with the fact of there not being a function book, and is that correct that there is not a function book, or was that a mistake? And if it was a mistake, when, in what timeline? Because you mentioned it in your presentation, the prison 90+ workers will be included. So if you can provide some clarity on that matter, why there was a delay and how that delay will be resolved and in what timeline. Other than that, when I saw that you have changed, through you, Madam Chair, the procedure to making it in an earlier stage that the justice workers can come in and they can get clarity on where we are in the procedure, I looked at it from a perspective of communication, because often communication is lacking, and when you don't have no communication, you will just assume. And when there is communication, you can also make adjustments, because maybe in the begin phase, you wanted something, and then later on changes come in your position, and then if there is no communication at the end stage, it's like, okay, this is not what I wanted. That's what I wanted a year ago, but currently my position has changed. So what I automatically think of is mediation, having communication between parties, and having understanding. And what that automatically can, what can happen automatically in connection to that is that also the objections will become less, because once you have a phase in between and you communicate with each other, adjustments can be made, and then that will avoid the process to be longer. So if the ministry can provide clarity on that, if that was the intention behind making that extra tussenstap. I also understood that in the periods of the previous ministers that a lot of Landsbesluiten were signed, and that now it seems that, okay, there's a delay. But what I would like to know is, in the 1 till 12 Landsbesluiten, were there mistakes in those Landsbesluiten? Because I understand and I respect the fact of the justice workers being very patient, because they have been waiting a long time. But what I would like to avoid, especially of it taking so long, that you will now continue on the same path, and then eventually there will be still mistakes in the Landsbesluiten that are being made. And that will then eventually, not only an objection, but I understood that my colleague mentioned that your job is just to sign the Landsbesluiten, basically, if I understood correctly, through you, Madam Chair. But personally, I do not agree with that, because if we are looking at the current position of our country and we're looking at the finances of our country, I believe we should do it. Other colleague, I'm now rephrasing to all my colleagues, but MP Doran always will say, haastige spoed is zelden goed, right? And if you're doing haastige spoed, and then eventually you will go to court, court will then have extra costs connected to it, and then country will have to pay for it because mistakes were made. So I'm trying to look at how the ministry can make sure that, one, the justice workers are getting what they're due to, because it has taken a long time, but on the other hand, we will not have unnecessary court cases, which we have seen in the past, various ministries, unnecessary cases being taken to court, being lost. My dear colleague MP Lewis can talk about that, because he has represented a lot of people in court and won the cases because of mistakes made by the ministries. So for us to avoid that from happening, I do see a positive point of you having that just to stop in communicating with the justice workers so that the clarity that currently is lacking, at least it seems that it's lacking, and the open door policy that is maybe not in place or not in place in how the workers would like to have it, that can add to a positive a positive side of making sure that the workers are getting what they're due to. Other than that, I also heard my colleagues asking in regards to payments. I can recall, and I would like to know if that has changed, that there was an agreement signed by one of the previous ministers in regards to a payment schedule plan. I can recall it was depending on the amount that you should receive in a max of 10 years. Don't quote me on the amount of years, but if it's a huge lump sum, then it will be spread over 10 years. And depending on the smaller amount, it will be 8 years, 6 years, 5 years, or a one-time payment. Could you provide more clarity in regards to that? Because I don't know if that has changed or is still in place, but seeing that my dear colleagues are asking questions about the payment, I would like to know which payment structure is currently being used. I believe that those are my questions for now, but seeing that I'm very passionate about this topic, I might add to this again. Yes?
Thank
That's
you.
it for now.
Thank you, MP Roseberg. The next speaker is MP Dimar Labega. MP Labega, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you, Minister of Justice, for that elaborate presentation. One thing, when you give your presentation, whether you like it or not, the information is very clear. As the MP before me stated, my main point, we're here discussing what is taking the process so long. But then to me, you clearly stated that people that are getting their LBAs are complaining that for whatever reason, they're not happy with it. So to take a step back and measure twice before you cut and say, hey, let's make sure that everybody is happy with what's in the LBA before we now issue them. Now it alleviates the process of them getting the LBAs, going to court, or whatever. Somebody made a statement saying that, you know, just issue it and let them fend for themselves once they have it, which to me doesn't make any sense. So if I was the one to receive an LBA, if it takes a little longer to make sure that it's correct and I don't have to object to it, then I would be all for that. So if that's the case, possibly a campaign to explain everyone that this is the process, because the people that are complaining that it's taken long going to get it and then complain that it's incorrect, to me that's just contradictory. So if that is the process, then I agree with making sure it's done correctly and then getting it done once and for all. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Labega. The next MP to speak is MP Peterson. MP Peterson, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to yourself, to the Griffier, to the Honorable Minister and the support staff, to my honorable colleagues, and to everybody tuned in. Minister, to you, Madam Chair, I did not have specific questions concerning the actual justice force, because I believe you've been bombarded with enough questions as it is. But what I would want to ask about is something that I've been asking about, but not specific about this topic, but, you know, the court of guardianship. And it's not concerning specifically their, you know, the landbesluit that they're supposed to be getting, but more so concerning how an overgang would happen if, for example, somebody from the court of guardianship wants to transfer to another ministry. So not within the justice ministry, but to another ministry, for example, the VSA or to education. Why do I ask this is because, you know, we both know about the discrepancies in regards to the LBAs by the court of guardianship and the contracts, etc. But when it comes to the overgang to another ministry, then it becomes a question of, are they actual civil servants or not? So, for example, if somebody has been working at the court of guardianship and does have a landbesluit and they want to transfer, for example, to another department within a whole other ministry, is that like a civil servant transferring over on the basis of their existing law enforcement, meaning that they don't have to resign because they're already permanent, for example, or would they have to resign regardless of having a law enforcement by the court and guardianship because of the whole discrepancy of there not being in a leal, etc. So basically the overgang, and it's not specifically for those with LB, but just in general, but specifically also for those who already have an LB and are already permanent, but still, you know, are being requested, for example, to resign before they, you know, start back within another ministry. And that's the only question I have for now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Peterson. MP Lacroes, you have the floor.
A blessed afternoon, Madam Chair Lady Griffier, Minister of Justice, her support staff, my fellow colleagues, and all those watching and listening. Madam Chair Lady, through you to the Minister of Justice, I have two questions, basically, because I've heard everyone ask all the other questions that I was prepared to ask. And the first one is, how many justice workers do we have right now at home? And the reason for asking this question is because the frustration of LBs does not only lie on the payment, but it's the load, the amount of work and the weight to get things done because there are not enough employees at a specific location. For example, immigration. And both the minister and her chief of staff could attest to it, that I have numerous times asked about this, people waiting 14 months, which in my opinion is crazy. And this creates frustration within the population. So my question is, how many employees do we have at home right now? Are there any plans to get these employees back on? If something happened at a specific department, put them in another. But eventually, if we are paying, if the taxpayers are paying, then they should be at work. Or finalize the firing process and eventually rehiring other people to take over the job. So that is definitely something that I'm curious to know. What are the plans from the minister when it comes to immigration? Because it is now out of control. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
Thank you, MP Lacroes. The next MP up to speak is MP Irian. MP Irian, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, colleagues. Good afternoon, Minister and your support staff. And good afternoon to the many justice workers actually tuning in, because I'm getting some messages. What I do realize is a lot of MPs who sat here before and some who have left during the term of the last government, I think really underestimated the work by the former Minister of Justice, Anna Elaine Richardson, in regard to even getting to this point. Because when we hear certain questions today, the level of understanding wasn't there at that time. And when I see what she was able to do in that period of time, especially when it came to even making payments, I would say a lot of workers are a little happy then with the process then. Minister, you mentioned, a former MP mentioned basically trust. And my question to you is, how can you build trust back with your staff? Is it possible to maybe publish the breakdown of per department of the delays, so they know, hey, this is our timeline as a department or as an individual? Because I think one of the issues, what you are facing is expectation, unmet expectations actually, right? So I think that's the main problem, unmet expectations with a lack of, let's say, communication directly to individuals. And that's the main complaint that they're having. Because there are persons that have been waiting since 10-10-10. And that's another question I have. what is going to happen with those LBAs going back to 10-10-10? And actually, what is the amount, what is the total amount in terms of payment that we are expected? So if you look at all of the justice workers that have to go back to 10-10-10, what does the final package in terms of payment looks like? And because another minister mentioned, MP mentioned, in terms of the payment payout, then you could estimate to see it in the upcoming budgets laid out properly. Because I think one justice worker even looked at, said, hey, I don't see my payment in the budget. I don't think you'll see it later, but I think they do want to know in terms of what this total figure is. Because I'm hearing different numbers. I heard a number even change. So I would like to know what the final figure is. Also recently, the government has published the Jubilees. So the legislation regarding the Jubilees has been published, I believe, this week. And it goes back retroactively to January 1st, 2024, discussion we had here with the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister. In particular, I asked if this was going to be in the budget 2025, because now it has been published, so now we have to pay it out, right? Can you confirm or bring some clarity to how many individuals in the Justice Department are entitled to Jubilees going back to the January 1st, 2024. So, because now we have Jubilees starting at 15 years, 20 years, 25, 30, 35, 40, 45 years. So how many do we have that are entitled to those? A tricky point here comes though, that persons are only entitled to Jubilees if they have an LBA. So now that's a little concerning to some because some don't have their LBAs as yet. But if they got their LBA, they would have been entitled to their Jubilee going back to that time. So how do you plan to address this? And are you going to have discussions with the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister in terms of, hey, these are individuals that will be entitled to their Jubilee once the LBA is signed, so we have to have the finance, the money to pay them. And dark hours. Can I get some clarity in terms of how the dark hours work for justice officers? I saw in the LMA it's about 40 cents an hour, I believe. So do they have their own dark hours, or do they fall under that of the LMA? And in your presentation, you mentioned a overfunction of FTEs. So I'm assuming you have a department and there's like 10 FTEs, but now you have 15 individuals per this department. And you're taking, I'm assuming you're gonna take the persons that are over and put them in other departments. But are you looking at their qualifications, their capabilities, and what if they say they don't want to be in these departments? Because I know in the past, like years ago, persons were basically, ministers in the past have just created positions for individuals. And that was one of the issues that the Minister Richardson was dealing with promises were made to individuals. I've even seen emails where they were saying, hey, you're going to be put in this position. But that position didn't actually have an FTE. But at the end of the day, government created an expectation. And we were still then trying to ensure that these individuals still were paid based on that expectation. So in this case, what are we going to do? Yes, there isn't the FTE, but an expectation was created by government. The person actually worked and functioned in this position with the expectation that this job will be created. So now that person says, hey, I don't want to be put in this position. I want to work in the position that was promised. What is the government going to do? And I think that'll be all for me, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, MP Irian. The next MP up to speak is MP Myers.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And a good afternoon, a pleasant good afternoon to the Minister and her support staff, to those to my colleagues here in Parliament, those of you watching via social media, ladies and gentlemen. Excuse me. Minister, I would like to thank you for your presentation. There was a lot of information that I myself was not aware of, that in the presentation I was able to get. One of the things I think that's important is, I have a question. I only have two questions, Minister. How many batches are still outstanding? And if you can give a timeline as to when do you when do you feel you will have all of the necessary batches completed? I think those are the two most important questions that I have to ask. What number of batches what number of the batches are you presently working on? And, we hear a lot of, and this is an advice to you, Minister, and your support staff. We hear a lot of talk as it regards the batch. But please, I want you to not look at it as a batch. I want you to look at it as a family. I want you to look at families as parents providing for their families. This is something that these justice workers in all realms have been, championing for some time. And I try to, when I find myself in a situation, I try to put myself in the situation that the person in the problem is in. And I could only imagine what it's like to be working in a function and to not be duly compensated based on what is your do right. Like former minister and now current MP Lyndon Lewis, who has come up through the police force, and I also know of some cases in where he represented the workers in the police. And one, I have friends and family and that also work in the police station, and in the justice field. So let's have a little, when we are looking, and again, sometimes we get caught up in the semantics and the wording of stuff. We call it a batch, and it dehumanizes. It takes the human aspect out of what those batches actually represent. Those batches, each of them, each individual stick represents a family, a mother, a father, trying, just on their daily grind while they're going out, and whether they're in the immigration department, and whether they're in the prison guards, whether they're in customs, whether they're police officers, they're going out on the grind, and at the end of the day, they're trying to provide for their family. And so I think that's the approach I'm asking you to, when you're working on the batches, to consider that behind every name, behind every number of batches, there is a family. I'm not going to ask about the cost, the cost of what the impact it would have. Some of my colleagues already asked that on the budget, because I also believe it is something that is due to these workers. And I know there is a lot of areas in which we as a country have been behind the 8 ball in getting our house in order, and justice is one of them. But I also feel that as time goes by, we will definitely get there. I want to make something emphatically clear. This government, who I'm a part of, and my faction in particular, we stand with the justice workers. We are here to solve and help them in any way that we can, and we're available to them at all times. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Myers. And I continue, and I now give the floor to MP York. MP York, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I'm going to keep it short. After hearing all the questions, I think we've practically touched or spoke on almost everything up to now. I would just like to, through you, Madam Chair, leave the minister with one word of advice. And it's the same advice I've given to another minister, and it's the same advice I've given to the Minister of Justice as well. But, you know, after something today, although, albeit small, I still find the need to reiterate that, repeat that, that advice. That advice is words carry weight. And in saying that, the reason I'm saying that is because earlier, when I thought I misspoke because the way the minister reacted, I thought I heard wrong. But after speaking to some other colleagues, it was no. In past interviews and past press briefings, in past moments, speaking about the L.B.S., the minister has coined certain phrases or used certain words, such as mistakes and errors, and even used the phrase quality over quantity, right? And in using these words, it gives the people interpret from those words that someone did something wrong, right? And now, today, when I use the word error of mistakes, the minister said, no, to you, Madam Chair, objections. And objections could be opinionated, or not always factual. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. It doesn't automatically imply that something was done wrong. And I'm going into the semantics in this for a particular reason, because when someone thinks someone did something wrong, someone gets unnecessary blame, right? So, and there are other examples that the minister is aware of where the wrong word was used, and you know what follows. So I would just like to, once again, give the minister advice that words carry weight, and before using certain examples or certain words to explain herself, to really think it through, because, or if you use the wrong word today and you change it tomorrow, stand accountable for it and say, hey, I said this, that was not the case, it is this, right? And the minister could put up her shoulders like she don't know what I'm talking about, but I think at this point, YouTube, if you look it up on YouTube, there are good examples to find out what I mean by this. So yes, words carry weight. And minister, please, 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 please keep this in mind moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, MP York. And the next speaker up is MP Waver. MP Waver, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon to the griffier, Honorable Minister, support staff, and my honorable colleagues here today. A lot was said, but I would just like to see, because there seems to be a perception given that in the past, all those batches, as we call them, the previous ones in the beginning, I want to know through you, Madam Chair, to the Minister, were there any objections previously issued with those batches? Because I ask this because my phone also does receive text messages. And I know during that time, I received some messages as well stating that there were some concerns, you know? So to have a perception out there that the justice ministers were happy back then as well when it started, although I do commend the process in which it took place and where it is now heading to a solution, because at the end of the day, we all want a solution. And another question through you, Madam Chair, how has the change in governor, how has that affected the process? Because I know in some cases within government, certain L.B.S that would be approved previously are now looked at a more critical eye or a different eye, and then the L.B.S would be sent back to the government to then reissue or to make certain changes. So how has that maybe affected the way forward? Through you, Madam Chair. That'll be all for me right now. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Waver. MP Roseburg, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just again, I would like to have that known through you, Madam Chair, for clarity and also seeing what my other colleagues brought forward. Minister, could you please explain legally what objection means? Because it would be unfortunate if it's being misinterpreted, especially for the community listening, seeing that objection indeed can mean mistakes. So therefore, I ask the questions through you, Madam Chair. If there were mistakes, because mistakes can be made, it's human, right? So were there mistakes made between batch 1 and 12? If that's the case, are these mistakes now being corrected? And in that objection period, other than mistakes, what were the other issues? Because objections, indeed, as brought forward, can also be that, okay, I do not agree with a certain decision taken. I believe, based on our other colleague, based on the gelijkheidsbeginsel, based on the fact that something wasn't motivated correctly, that I should get other position or should be placed in the other scale. So just for transparency's sake and seeing what has been said and what conclusion has been taken to what has been said based on mistakes being made or quality over quantity, if you can go into those details in regards to the objection phase and what you have seen in that objection phase, mistakes and or other pointers, different view of opinion on what that justice worker is entitled to. Other than that, I went through the presentation because we received it again, and I would like to ask through you, Madam Chair, for the minister to make, like I'm seeing, I think it's slide number 9, where a new, transparent, and efficient approach is being brought forward, where you have phase 1, phase 2, where I find it commendable that you put phase 2 where you're mentioning the 30-day period, because in my humble opinion, if that stayed at the end, it will cause extra delay. But then when we go to phase number 3, I'm seeing that it's mentioned retroactive payments are processed in the next payroll. I would like to ask the minister through you, the ministry through you, to make that a bit more clearer to the justice workers, because when I read that, and I have been working for over, let's say, if I use MP Lewis as an example, 18 years, and I should be receiving payment, I expect all the payment to be received the next payroll. And based on the agreement that I'm aware of, and which I ask clarity for, there is a payment period schedule, members? There's a payment period schedule in place. So when you read that, it can bring the idea that I will receive, based on my 18 years of service, receive the payment the next payroll. While that is in what I remember based on the agreement, that will not be the case with the 18-year dienstverband. It would be the case if it's maybe 2 years or 1 year, if I can recall the agreement that the previous minister had signed. So if that can be clarified, and then to just make it easy for the workers to understand that there's a schedule, maybe placed online, if that is not the case as yet. Okay, you're working for this amount of years, then you will get to the next payroll. If it's a certain amount of years that is longer, then you will get it then and then. And I believe that that can also be discussed during the phase 2, where you have the objection period, so that it's clear what to expect in phase 3. That's all for now.
Thank you, MP Roseberg. I now give the floor to MP Ottley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, at times, yes, it is indeed imperative to protect your ministers, especially when you're in a coalition. But being an initiator of this meeting, I think it's important that we leave with the essence of the true reason this meeting was called. For the minister, through you, Madam Chair, to notify the public, justice workers, St. Martin at large, the reason that the LBAs are not being issued at this moment. Minister, you gave your reasoning, and on behalf of myself and my faction, our advice to you is, as I said, do not mainly focus on just objections. You will not be able to please everyone, but get the job done. Ensure that you are continuously and tirelessly working on this process, which I'm sure you are at this moment, but get it done as soon as possible. And I thank you for the elaborate explanation. I thank you for owning up to what you are doing, whatever process you are doing. But my one advice is to ensure that you take the union along with you each and every step of the way. And most importantly, again, get it done. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Ottley. Minister Tacklin, as I look to the screen and realize that there are no other MPs to speak at this time, I ask for your response in terms of anything you can address right now, and secondly, your proposal in terms of providing whatever outstanding questions might be left. Minister Tacklin.
Thank you, Honorable Chair Lady, for the floor. I wanted to at least, I think there was a general sentiment and some statements made. So I thought, let me perhaps address some of those in general, and then we can come back and make a proposal of when we can come back to address any individual outstanding questions after that. So I'll maybe, to agree with my fellow lawyer in the room, the word objection can mean many things. I think in some instances an objection means, yes, there were errors, and an objection can also be a person's general sentiment. And I'll also, through you, Madam Chair, go back to, what MP Meyer said, that we need to treat the justice workers as individuals. And I can, as a minister, yes, I have an obligation to issue landsbesluiten, but I also have an obligation to ensure that my workers are acknowledged, respected, and heard. And I feel like when I go to all the meet and greets, because contrary to what was said today, we do meet with justice workers all the time. They meet with multiple members of my staff. They come to me directly. There is an open door. Maybe it's not Friday at 2 o'clock, but there is always an open door. And I think many justice workers would attest to the fact that when they have reached out with anything that was urgent or pressing or important to them, that I've immediately made time in my schedule. And I'm sure the unions can attest to the same, because I've gotten calls from the union where from 1 minute to the next, I stopped what I was doing and I went over to address rooms filled with civil servants. So this is exactly the reason why I found it necessary to really look into the process, because I think that we still have disgruntled workers, and it's not for me to throw jabs at any of my predecessors. Again, as I stated in my speech, I said, all of this was done with good intention. And we keep learning from those things. And in many of the discussions that I had, when I went to meet and greets and I spoke to people and I said, did you get your LBA? And then it was, yeah, but it's not good. Or it was, oh, I got a placement offer and I never got a response. And so we have years of workers, since 10, they feel they didn't get what they were entitled to. And now again, they still feel like they're not being listened to. And this is exactly why I want to incorporate them earlier into the process for them to feel heard. Because you even have people that say, I ain't gonna bother object because it don't matter what I say anyway. So then, yes, it's everybody's right to object. But if that is the sentiment, to me, I as a minister have that obligation, the same way that they can find their way to me anytime that they want, for me to listen to them and include them. And that is precisely the reason why we're saying, let's have these conversations earlier. Because sometimes that can better inform your decision-making as a minister as well. Because sometimes they have extra documents that you didn't have, that's not anywhere in any other system, that then you can say, oh, actually, let's adjust this LBA, instead of then having to go through the process. You got to go to an objection committee. I got to pay an objection committee. You can go to court. I got to pay the court. As a minister, I also have an obligation to keep the expenses of the country under control. And, if I'm opening a door to litigation, then to me, I'm also not handling responsibly in my duty. Then there were some questions about the processes, procedures. My understanding is batches 1 to 5 were handled by Minister Richardson, batches 6 to 12 by Minister Lewis, and I understand that from batch 11 there was a change in the process by the SG, And that process led to some delays in the processing of the batches, which is also why, we recognize that things were not happening as they should and said, let's figure out how we can restructure this. And then, of course, I also got a question about the integral worker that was involved in this process, and that is actually the individual that processed all 12 batches before, or I should say all 11. So 1 to 5 through Minister Richardson, and 6 through 11 through Minister Lewis, which I'm sure he can attest to the integral role that individual played throughout the process. So it's just we've seen little changes along the way that have, again, sometimes caused delays. And that's been a reason that, I've said, let's take a different look. And again, if you have people, unfortunately, the process was also made maybe too dependent on a particular person. And now we see when a person like that leaves our organization, nobody knows what to do anymore. And that has also, to be very frank here, been a reason for the delay. Because we simply, it seems like we're feeling around in the dark and things are not happening fast enough or the way that they should. And that's why we're looking for how we can do this in a quicker way. And I agree, that objections will always occur, but I think it's what we've noticed is the type of objections, the type of sentiments that are there. These are things that we can address in an earlier phase that don't necessarily need people to go to court or to go to an objection, so we can, if we have these conversations before, then we can better address the problems. And I think, as was said here today, there's been a very serious lack of communication with the justice workers throughout this process. And that's why we've wanted to have timely communication and have them involved more seriously in the process. Then I wanted to also touch on the payments, because there has been, so there's 2 phases that have been agreed upon. And these 2 phases, from my understanding, were also the reason that the governor at the time agreed to the entire function work process. There were 2 phases that were agreed upon in the unions, in the CCSU. Phase 1 is the period of January 1st, 2023, until the day that you receive your landsbesluit. Those payments are lump sum payments. Once you get your LB, that was in the slide. When you get that LB, then you receive then your payment retroactive to January 1st, 2023. Phase 2 of this entire process is going to be the period from 10/10/10, or whatever date you entered into service, up until December 31st, 2022. That, within there were indeed agreements made within the CCSU for payment plans. I have that over here. Currently, the estimated amount for the entire procedure, or for this entire process, is roughly 44.5 million guilders. And that would then be, of course, the extra retroactive payments that we talk about. There is a disbursement plan, as MP Roseberg had already alluded to. If your payout is more than 100,000 guilders, then it's 10 annual installments. If your payout is more than 70,000 guilders but less than 100, 7 annual installments, and et cetera, et cetera. There's a sliding scale that goes down. And then there's a special category for seniors that are 60 plus, up to a maximum of 4 years. And my understanding, this is somewhat dated information that I'm getting from previous ministers, but there are about 100 people that are eligible in that category. And so that was, I can of course give a bigger breakdown. Perhaps when I come back, I can break this down in slides exactly how this is built up so that the members can have that information. But I wanted to at least speak to the total amount of 44.5 million. And this number is, of course, an estimate. Then I was asked if this was discussed within the unions. I did recently have a CCSU meeting in which I explained to the unions that were present and within the CCSU what we were encountering and the sentiment of the employees as I spoke to them, whether they received the LB already, didn't object, whether they did receive one, didn't object. And there was understanding within that conversation as to the approach and why I was taking this route. And there was no objection that was made within the CCSU then by the unions present. We do, of course, have also 2 unions that are represented within the objection committee. And we have been in discussion with them about the change in the objection procedure, because I think the objection committee has also been a bit confused on how to operate. And from a list that I have here too, they had, in the past, since the end of last year, 34 objections were filed with the objection committee. So, you know, these are all things that add on and load this process. And it's, you know, it's why we've chosen to change this a little bit and incorporate people better. And because I believe that even if you rush off the process and give everybody a LBA, if they feel like this government doesn't listen to them and doesn't care about what they say, they'll be just as disgruntled. Maybe with a little more money, but they can still feel like they're not in the right position, they're not having the right salary, and then we're just kicking the can down the road. So that's really been the reason that we've done it this way. And I fully understand that I won't please everybody, and you know, we'll explain to them why the placement is this, and we also have a lot of emotional value that has been placed on certain things. You know, we have government created an expectation, people are used to certain things, they believe they're entitled to certain things, and those, of course, will be the ones that will have to be resolved and in court, unfortunately. But I think that it's important that as minister, I too have a duty of care. And my duty of care then is to ensure that I provide individuals with all the information as to why I came to a certain decision. And we believe that that is what we're doing with this change in the procedure. In terms of estimations, my estimate is that by Q4, we will have all batches completed, because we're really in the stages of really putting together all the cogs in the wheel to get everything moving. And there was a delay just to really look under the hood and see what was happening. And I am confident that by Q4, we can have everybody handled. And, you know, to go to MP Myers' question through you, Madam Chair, when he said, you know, we should stop talking about batches. It's why we've said, look, the remaining of what we're doing is 14-15 is everybody in the Justice Ministry except for the prison. And then we will handle the prison in one go. So everybody in the prison will be receive their LBA at the same time. That is the approach that we want to take, to have everything handled and make up for the months delay that we have had and that we have experienced. I'm looking around, I don't think I missed anything. No. I think then that those cover most of the general sentiment that was there, and we will come back. I'll confer to see when would be a good time for us to get all these responses. I'll double check if I missed anything. I think I have most of it. So I also had the whispered into my ear about why the prison has been the last, and from my understanding, it's, you know, changes in the management team at the prison during the entire placement process led to the fact that there were incorrect placements that were made. And also the types of functions had changed. For example, when you had a penitentiaire inrichting medewerker and a beveiligingswerker, are 2 different functions in the initial placement, but then they put all guards on that, which was a really significant error that was made in the prison. And as such, we had many staff members who had been assigned roles and positions in practice that had not been materialized into an actual function. So all in all, this led to a lot of complexity at the prison, and we had to end up hiring an external consultant to assist and guide the procedure and give a motivated and proper placement to within the rules and the framework. So that was recently completed, and that's why everybody in the first half of this year has now received their official placement at the Point Blanche prison, and that's why we can then move on to handling them once we finish 14 and 15. And again, the prison is, you know, is one that's especially near and dear to me, because they're the ones that are, you know, feeling it the most in their salaries. You know, we have guards at the prison that earn $1,000 a month. And that to me is unacceptable, that we have anybody working under those types of conditions. And it's why I think it's all the more important that we really move this forward and get this done, you know, like I said, by Q4 of this year, so that we can ensure that everybody is in their rightful positions.
Thank you, Minister Taklin. Members of Parliament, the Minister has addressed concerns, we're not through yet. Sorry, Minister, we do have MP Lewis who wishes to speak at this time. MP Lewis, you have the floor.
It will be very brief, Chair Lady. I keep overlooking it. Minister, with the process, we have also the pensioners that's on pension from within the Justice Ministry. And I think we need to review that again and give them as much priority. I do not think there's so many justice workers that is on pension, in that we focus on giving them their retroactive payments as well, because life expectancy is at the age of 70, and our pension age now is 65, and a lot of people have died, and now their families are who are getting these monies, and I think they should get their money now in order for them to enjoy the balance of their life. With that said, thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, MP Lewis. I see that MP Myers is requesting the floor. MP Myers, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On another note, just a side note, considering that we're talking about justice, and Member of Parliament Lyndon Lewis just mentioned pensioners. Today is the birthday of a former police officer known to us as Major Brown. I would like to extend birthday wishes to Major Brown and his family and wish them all the best. On a side note.
Thank you, MP Myers. Well said, and I join you in expressing congratulations to retired policeman Major Brown and his entire family. And I see MP Lacroes requesting the floor. MP Lacroes, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair Lady. And I also forgot to mention and congratulate our Minister of Rami that today is his birthday. And I think it passed everyone's head, so congratulating the Minister of Rami on his birthday, Patrice Gomes. Thank you, Madam Chair Lady.
That is also correct. Thank you, MP Lacroes. And again, on behalf of all of us here, we extend best birthday wishes to Minister Patrice Gomes Jr. and congratulations to his family on his birthday. And members of Parliament, you have heard the Minister address several concerns raised by members of Parliament here. There are a few outstanding questions. I would want to propose to the members of Parliament and to the Minister that the answers to these questions be sent to us in writing as soon as possible, along with, if any, updates on the subject at the time of submitting the answers. So not only providing answers to the questions, but if there are any updates regarding said subject, that this also be included in the update to Parliament. And members of Parliament, if you can agree with that, then we can close this meeting and not have it open for the Minister to come back and answer to these questions. I would prefer to have them as soon as possible in writing than to have 2-3 weeks before the Minister can return. And by that time, then we probably would still have to get an update on where things are at. So members of Parliament, if you can agree to that, then we would, or we have someone who would like, and that is the someone is MP Ottley. MP Ottley, you have the floor.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I have no objections to such. I just would like to, through you, for you to ensure that these answers are sent. We are still awaiting the answers that were supposed to be sent by the Minister of Finance that was supposed to be sent urgently, and I see we have a meeting coming up on Tuesday. So I look to you as the Chair of Parliament to ensure a deadline on when we can receive both answers from both ministers.
Thank you, MP Ottley, and rest assured that the ministers are reminded of outstanding questions by members of Parliament and also questions coming from meetings by members of Parliament. But note taken of your request. I see the minister. I assume the minister is checking her schedule in terms of when the answers can be provided. And again, like we also would say in writing to the ministers, when written questions are posed by members of parliament, then according to our rules of order, it is 3 weeks that the minister would have to respond to questions. And if you cannot, at least give the answers that you have and let us know when the outstanding questions can still be answered. So if you have 90% of the answers potentially within 1 week, then we look forward to that, and the 10% can come when possible. Minister, your response in terms of answering the questions?
Perfect. We were here back and forth saying that I was telling Tamara I wanted to have the answers here by the end of next week. So that's perfect. I think we have a lot of them, so we'll just ensure we have any tweaks made.
Noted. Thank you, Minister. That commitment for answers will be noted by our SG. And thus, Minister, I want to thank you and your support staff here for your presentation on the topic 1 and your responses to concerns raised by members of parliament. Members of parliament, I want to thank you for your participation in this meeting. As the minister indicated, we should be looking forward to these answers by the end of next week. And with that in mind, and again expressing thanks for your participation, I hereby close this Central Committee meeting of Parliament. Meeting closed.